All right, I thought I would discuss something. So, there's like three different terms for the same thing, basically, that I've heard being thrown around and so on. There's foxes versus lions. Uh, their reaction is our action from Saul Alinsky from the book Rules for Radicals. And then there's the rules-based order and so on. Um, uh, and this ties into the left of center um, quite handily because the left subverts into power and the right tramples into power. The left is sneaky and underhanded, and the right is domineering and uh, obviously hostile when it's hostile. It's not passive aggressive. And this literally comes from the fact that the left are the less 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 moral people, basically, on average. Now, there's a position for the left in a good society I want to put out there, which is that they tolerate less than perfect behavior, which the right sort of needs a little bit of a occasional, not necessarily always, but occasional tug in the direction of. So I want to put that caveat out there first, so you don't think I'm just like entirely one-sided without um, anything to go with, basically, because the left is also a bit of the minorities and the outcasts and the less perfect, less good people and so on. So there's a tolerance thing there in a way that if you get too puritanical or too strict morally or something like that, it can in fact be tyrannical. Like just like I'm just setting the metaphysical, theoretical possibilities here, not necessarily what we're going through right now. Um, and because of this, um, the left generally is the natural minority. And they're obviously worse than the right when they're in power for a while and so on. The more power they get, the worse they are. Because they don't have the moral structures and ethical development of character and so on that the right is so heavy on, typically speaking. Um, and they don't really work on themselves as people entirely that much, compared to the right, it seems like. Um, I know it's a bit of a generalization, but generally that's the case, I think. I know there's plenty of room for outliers and so on, in certain ways at least. Different ways typically, be it between left and right, but this is a general fact. Um, the outcasts and losers in society do, in fact, deserve some degree of pity, and the minorities deserve not to be stomped on literally left, right, and center 24/7, uh, most often. However, a good society does have a stable set of consistent demands of behavior that it enforces on various levels. I made a video about the private sphere, the social sphere, and the legal sphere. So private life, wider social stuff like social media or something, online presence as a public figure or something, and then like the criminal law basically as levels of enforcement and increasing strictness but lowered breadth or width of enforcement on various issues in a way, or more concise enforcement and so on. And the left doesn't understand this because it is a very not self-developed group of people. They like to say the personal or the private is political, but they don't like the social sphere much as an alternative to enforcement of good values, unless, well, actually, no, that's not right. That's not quite right. The left engages in cancel culture. The left engages in political assassinations. The left disowns their family over Thanksgiving dinners a lot more often than the right does. They purity spiral a fair bit downwards. The purer leftism you get, the worse it gets. Despite me saying that a little bit of leftism's tendencies is actually an important thing. It needs to be constrained by a powerful right wing, and it needs to stay in the position of servant to the right wing masters, basically. The soft hand, or the velvet glove over the iron fist, so to speak. The diplomat versus the conqueror. And the right wing's correct place is dominance in society. Now, this does mean that the left, being rather flawed compared to the right, typically speaking, and being part of the minorities, because if relativism is correct, then the majority of a society is usually in the correct, even if they're on an absolute scale less correct. From a God-given objective moral framework, possibly. Or maybe it's some interplay between the two or something like that, where it's like some way it plays out where stability is more important than perfection in being good morally, and then you evolve into a superior morality, which does not mean softer, necessarily, or weak, or two-tiered, or any of those things that the left is currently doing. And so on. Now, what this means, though, in terms of outside of character, in terms of tactics that the left will favor, is their reaction is our action, or make a martyr out of someone, and so on. But the left knows they'll lose when the chips are down and all the hands are shown and so on, every single time, evolutionarily. When you engage in total culture war, the right is going to win eventually. And big time. So the left gets power by obfuscating or throwing chaff in the air to distract people, or twist language, so that there's not a stable communication tool and analysis tool to set your foundations on, so that you can assess the accurate situation really well and really easily compared to otherwise. That's why they keep inventing new names for various minorities, and the new names get the same connotations as the old names and so on. And they just keep inventing new names and banning the old names that even they came up with, and so on. We see that with various words for black people or gays or something like that, or maps. You know, they constantly invent new names to escape the connotations given to the old names that are accurate but unpleasant about themselves. And they're shifty, and that's why they're shifty, because they'll lose if there's a lifting of the veil and everyone sees everyone else clearly. The left will always lose because they're more flawed than the right is, typically speaking. And the right's values and cultivation of character emphasis is why the left will lose, basically. And that's why the left plays on envy and thrives in civilizations that aren't doing so hot because of corruption, because they lean into pushing more people to be envious and not develop themselves, and so on, to stay infantile and so on. And they thrive off making more people infantile so that the leaders of the left can who push and lead and convince people to be leftists and pay them money or give them fame and fortune and so on, and influence and power. The people doing that and benefiting, or the people trying to get in a position where they can, rely on the dependency of others and so on. Now, this explains why socialism is on the rise today as well, because good times create weak men, and weak men create socialism or hard times. It explains also why they side with the other minorities to some extent, because their entire strategy and modus operandi is take the people no one likes, mostly, and form a coalition of the losers to overthrow the natural winners and so on. And they lie about their intentions and so on, and they code everything in compassion to hide their envy and murderous rage and so on. And they play the victim as much as possible to and like, if you notice, they make demons the victims, they make bugs the victims, who are like genocidal bugs the victims. They make Muslims the victims. They make maps the victims. They make all sorts of people who are not very good the victims. And basically, it's because they're weak. And they don't try and strengthen themselves morally or courageously or anything like that. They just try and game the system for maximum benefit without actually earning anything, mostly. They don't have faith in themselves much, and so on. And it's not even a matter of just like... It's not even a matter of like literally every one of them does it. It's like a certain degree of a bell curve amongst the left. You get some people who are leftist and really productive and decent moral people somewhat and so on. And that's like 0.1% of the population of leftists. And then you get to like the 10% population of leftists, and they're a little weaker, and they're a little more leftist, and so on and so on. And it just goes all the way to the very end when you get the worst people who are the most left. So if you could shift the population rightwards again, then the improvement would be there. And the people who are decent people who are leftist would just be slightly right of center compared to slightly left of center. And it would be a society more focused on self-cultivation and improvement for the benefit of their fellow man and so on. Which sounds kind of leftist in a way, except the thing is, you do it by nation state or divided boundary at certain levels to certain degrees based on your role politically or societally or business-wise or something like that. You have domains and stuff, which is a right-wing concept. The left wants to eradicate all boundaries, including the ones people set up for themselves to protect themselves from bad people or overwhelmingness, and so on. And they don't break down problems. They try and get more power directly over things to solve the problems because they don't trust other people's problem solving. And no wonder, because everyone they're around that agrees with them sucks at life, and they know they suck at life too, and they view people succeeding as competition in a very zero-sum game kind of way. And I'm saying zero-sum game does exist, but an absolute scale does exist too. And you don't want to be an absolute scale poverty-stricken country or people while being top of the rubble pile, basically. At least most people in the right wing don't want to be. They would rather be a servant in heaven than a king in hell or rule hell. And the left wants to rule in hell rather than serve in heaven. Ironically, though, the right-wing self-cultivation of skills and capacity and virtue and so on makes them better leaders than the left in the first place, for the well-being of their fellow man and so on, in accordance with those boundaries you mentioned of domains of responsibility that are reasonable. Now the left also does something, which is the left. Saul Alinsky says their reaction is our action, and the truth is that's nothing special. That's just called being a martyr, basically. The way to avoid making martyrs of the left is not to spurg out as a right winger. Be measured and just. Account for the facts and so on. It doesn't matter in the long run if the truth is putting on its shoes while the lie gets halfway around the world already. Because the fact of the matter is, once the truth is settled, it's very hard to dislodge it. It's all about maintenance at that point. It's just about, like I said earlier in an earlier video or two, the Constitution of the United States isn't there to prevent tyranny. It's there to slow its spread in the hopes that the long run will contain it and then roll it back. And there's the Abraham Lincoln saying, I believe, or maybe it's Churchill, I can't remember. But someone famous in one of those big wars said, you can fool some people all of the time, and you can fool all people some of the time, but you can't fool all people all the time. And I guess the anti-socialist, anti-third world, anti-Muslim community of various base right-wingers and Christians are just sort of fearing at times that there's not enough people that like the truth and functional society and so on, or don't even remember what it's like, or never grew up when it existed or something, and have no idea how to do it and so on. But that's why people like me were trying to foster and facilitate and learn while we're doing it more and more so we get better at it, and develop a clear line of thinking from the trajectory of destruction to a trajectory of building up again. So yeah. Now the thing about the martyrs, or their reaction is our action, is it only works if you're not obviously a pile of crap to the wider community. And that's one of the reasons why the left needs to change language and misuse it all the time and so on, because they tend to be piles of crap. Yeah, I got my own flaws. I was a leftist once too, so I mean, I've got my own flaws naturally, bad upbringing and stuff like that too. But ever since I became properly right wing, more or less, I've been very hardcore on my own personal behavior and so on. It took me took making it a life or death issue quite literally, repeatedly, to be comfortable with my newfound values, or original childhood values, before I got twisted and corrupted for a while. But that's God's redemption for you in a nutshell. At least for those who really need it the most. I know that there's a Christian autism thing going on where it says everyone needs it equally, but you know what I mean damn well. And that's the leftist foxes and the right-wing lions, basically. They're both predators. They'll both eat the chickens or something, but the one's honest about it and the other one isn't. You know. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I got to add to this. All right. There's one more thing, and that is Antonio Gramsci. You can see where I'm going with all this, I think, in a general way, if you know who Gramsci is and the long march through the institutions and so on. That subversive, sneaky, hiding your true intentions so that you can control the experts to directly download your propaganda into other people's minds that they're not naturally attuned to or inclined towards, and so on. I mean, that's where DEI and stuff really started. Remember, they started the quota system and the affirmative action for the education system, more or less. And then everything turned leftist for a while. And that's another thing. The left can only co-opt things. It cannot generate things that are successful. Like in Diablo 2 class lore terms, it's like Cobra Strike or whatever, Serpent Strike, the vampire leeching thing from the assassin, and the right is like the paladin meditation aura or something, or prayer of healing or whatever, where they just automatically generate things from nothing, and so on. Um, and what the right is doing now with success is they looked at the assassin of the left in Diablo 2 class terms, and then they put on thorns aura, basically, and they're doing a lot of damage to the left now. The dynamic has changed, and the the left doesn't know how to handle it. So yeah, and it's literally a matter of minorities and majorities, which explains why the left wants to throw all these immigrants into the country and so on as minorities. So precisely so they can dismantle the unity of the majority, native people of that country, because they know they can't convince the majority of normal people of that country to support them. But if they can import people who share a enemy of the normal people of that country, the enemy being the normal people of that country, then they can guarantee their support for a little while at least until the newcomers become too powerful and separate and form their own faction, and it balkanizes. But as the right wing has noticed, the left wing is not that smart. So it's literally a matter of undermine the left as much as possible so you can get rid of the foreigners and then relegate the left to a very servant position going forwards for a long time until the next generations forget the lessons we learned and the cycle repeats itself eventually and so on. Yeah,